For years, I watched Laura drift farther away, lost in the illusions her mother and stepfather created for her. After she turned 18, she chose to sever all ties with me, leaving me in a void of unanswered questions and unspoken pain. I had always hoped she would reach out, that one day she would realize the love I had for her despite everything. But that day never came. Laura had been so deeply influenced by her mother's manipulation that it seemed like the bond between us had never existed. Her mother pampered her, sheltered her from reality, and failed to teach her the importance of family, of roots. And when the time came for Laura to take responsibility for her own life, she chose silence. Silence over reconciliation. Silence over understanding. Silence over the chance to heal the wounds of the past. It felt like betrayal, not just as a father, but as someone who had been constantly pushed aside, forgotten. I had always tried to be there for her, even when it seemed impossible, but she seemed to prefer the comfort of lies over the truth I could offer. Now, as time passed, I couldn't help but wonder, was it too late? Had the years of silence sealed our fate forever? Would I ever get my daughter back, or was she lost to me forever? At 22, after years of silence, Laura reappeared in my life, but only when she had nowhere left to turn. It was as if she had suddenly fallen from her sheltered world, the illusion of security shattered. Her stepfather had cut her off financially, and she was now begging for help. She claimed to be homeless, with no money to her name, living on the streets, desperate for anything that could save her from this cruel reality. It was almost impossible to believe. The girl who had once lived in luxury, whose every whim had been catered to, was now begging for scraps. Her voice trembled as she recounted her tragic tale, painting herself as a victim of a harsh, unforgiving world. She spoke of betrayal, of abandonment, as if I were the one who had wronged her. But what struck me the most was the cold realization that after all these years of choosing her stepfather's comfort over me, now that her safety net had vanished, she turned to me, the same father she had rejected so many years ago. It was a hard pill to swallow, and in that moment, I couldn't help but feel a mixture of anger, sorrow, and disbelief. How far had she fallen? And was I just another option in her desperate search for survival? When I finally agreed to meet Laura, I was not prepared for the reality that awaited me. She walked in, her eyes avoiding mine, her face a mixture of guilt and defiance. As we spoke, the truth came rushing out like a dam breaking. She wasn't the struggling, homeless victim she had claimed to be. No, the story was far more complicated and far more infuriating. It became clear that she had been pampered beyond belief by her mother and stepfather, shielded from any responsibility, living in a bubble of privilege that left her utterly unprepared for the real world. She had dropped out of school not because of any hardship, but because she was too busy vacationing with her mother and stepfather, dining in fancy restaurants, and living a life of indulgence. They had given her everything except the most important thing, discipline. She'd been allowed to live in this fantasy world where the consequences of her actions didn't exist. And now, standing in front of me, she expected me to accept her as my daughter again. The betrayal stung. How could she have wasted all these years, letting her mother and stepfather control her life, while I was left to pick up the pieces? The anger I felt was overwhelming. As I sat there, listening to Laura's words, the truth hit me like a sledgehammer. She finally confessed that her mother had orchestrated the entire plan to humiliate me. My heart sank. Laura admitted that my ex-wife had deliberately set out to make me look inadequate, all because I couldn't provide the lavish lifestyle she craved. The luxury brands, the designer clothes, the expensive accessories, none of which I could afford, became the catalyst for my downfall in her eyes. Laura told me, with a coldness that sent shivers down my spine, that her mother had planted this idea in her head. I wasn't good enough because I couldn't provide the superficial life that her mother wanted. It wasn't just about money. It was about power, control, and manipulation. My ex-wife, who had never truly understood the pressures I faced, used my inability to meet her materialistic expectations as a weapon to tear me down. The humiliation was part of a sick strategy to make me feel small, to make me feel worthless. And Laura, influenced by her mother, had stood by and watched, silent in her complicity. The betrayal stung deeper than I could have ever imagined. When Laura stood before me, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief that she was finally acknowledging me after all these years. Her confession, painful as it was, opened a door that had been slammed shut for so long. But as much as I wanted to welcome her with open arms, the reality of our fractured relationship weighed heavily on me. I looked at her, seeing the spoiled young woman who had been molded by her mother and stepfather. It wasn't lost on me that Lara hadn't just distanced herself from me, but had been fully swept away by the promises of a life that, in my eyes, was empty and shallow. "I accept you as my daughter," I said, my voice steady but firm. "But I won't give you money. I won't give you anything material. What I can give you, what I've always had for you, is love. But that's all." The words hung in the air, and I could see the hurt in her eyes. She had come to me hoping for a quick solution, a financial rescue, but I couldn't and wouldn't give her that. Not after everything. My decision wasn't about rejection. It was about teaching her a hard lesson. Love was something money couldn't buy. But would she understand that? Lara's persistence was overwhelming. After our last encounter, where I made it clear I would offer her no financial support, I thought the matter was settled. But she returned again and again, each time with a new plea this time. It was her grandmother desperate to manipulate the situation. She tried to appeal to my emotions, reminding me of the child I once knew, but the reality was far different now. She became someone I hardly recognized, someone entitled and demanding, clinging to the illusion that money could solve everything. "I need your help, Dad," Laura would say, her voice dripping with desperation, but underlined by a sense of entitlement. "I can't live like this anymore. My grandmother said you could help." But no matter how many times she came, asking for cash from anyone she could turn to, my answer remained unchanged. I wasn't going to enable her. I had made my boundaries clear, yet she refused to respect them. She wanted to live a lavish life without working for it, expecting people to rescue her from her own poor decisions. But I couldn't. No, I wouldn't be her financial crutch. And as much as it pained me to see her struggle, my resolve grew stronger with each visit. The final straw came after Lara's repeated visits and her growing arrogance. Despite all the chances I gave her, she continued to show blatant disrespect for me and my household. I had bent over backward trying to give her the benefit of the doubt, but with every interaction, her attitude grew more entitled, as though she were doing me a favor just by stepping through my door. It was clear that the girl I once knew was gone, replaced by someone who thought the world owed her everything. Her demands and blatant disregard for my boundaries had pushed me to my breaking point. That day, when she stormed me again with that same entitled expression, I knew something had to change. I could no longer allow her to come and go as she pleased, undermining everything I'd worked for, my peace, my family. It was time to draw the line. I decided to take a drastic step. If she returned again, there would be consequences. I made it clear to her that I would issue a restraining order, a legal document preventing her from stepping foot into my life. Her attitude had worn me down, and I was done. For over 2 years, I believed I knew everything about Emily, my sweet, caring girlfriend. But that all changed when I stumbled upon something I wasn't supposed to find. It all started innocently enough while I was scrolling through social media, and there it was, a Reddit account hidden away in the depths of the internet. The account was 8 years old, and as I clicked through it, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Emily, the girl I loved, had been a notorious troll. For years, she'd been leaving cruel, toxic comments, mocking and bullying strangers. It wasn't just a one-off thing. It was a pattern. Every post, every comment dripped with venom. I felt like the ground was ripped out from under me. How could the woman I adored, the woman who had always been kind and gentle with me, be someone capable of such vile behavior? My heart sank as I realized that the person I had thought I knew so well had been hiding a dark secret side. I felt betrayed, like everything I believed about her, about us, was built on a lie. I didn't know if I should confront her, or if I even wanted to. I was lost, confused, and hurt, unsure where to go from here. After uncovering Emily's Reddit account, my shock quickly turned into disgust as I dove deeper into her history of online behavior. Her posts were filled with venom, mocking, and belittling people, especially those with disabilities. I couldn't understand how someone so seemingly kind in real life could turn into a monster behind a screen. She would often downvote any post she didn't like, but it wasn't just disagreement. She reveled in crushing the spirits of those who were already vulnerable. Her comments were cruel, targeting people's insecurities and making fun of their struggles. It was as if she was hunting for weaknesses, taking pleasure in making others feel small. I thought back to all the times she'd been so sweet, so caring towards me, but it was like seeing two different versions of her, the loving girlfriend and this cruel, vicious online persona. It dawned on me that the kindness I thought I had found might be nothing more than a facade. I couldn't shake the feeling that the person I had fallen for didn't really exist, not in the way I thought. I had no idea how to reconcile this person with the Emily I had come to love. It felt like a betrayal I wasn't sure I could overcome. When I confronted Emily about her Reddit account, the room seemed to freeze. The weight of my question hung in the air as I struggled to mask my disappointment. Her eyes shifted uncomfortably before she finally admitted it. Yes, she had used that account to lash out, to release the anger she didn't know how to express. Her voice trembled as she confessed that the cruel comments were a way for her to blow off steam and gain the validation she couldn't find elsewhere. She told me it was an outlet, a place where she could feel powerful and in control when everything else felt chaotic. I was stunned. All this time, I had been under the impression that she was this kind-hearted, empathetic person, but now I saw a side of her I didn't recognize. It felt like a betrayal, like I'd been living a lie. She explained that it wasn't meant to harm anyone, but the reality hit me hard. The person I thought I knew had been hiding behind layers of anger and bitterness. I didn't know how to process what she had told me. The person I loved seemed so different, and I wasn't sure if I could look past this darker version of her. Despite my attempts to explain how hurtful and wrong her actions were, Emily remained unfazed. The more I pressed her, the more defensive she became. She didn't seem to understand why I was so upset. She claimed that the people she had insulted on Reddit were just victims of a simple online debate, and that they were only offended because they couldn't handle a little banter. She brushed off the criticisms, insisting that her words weren't meant to cause any real harm. It was as though she was completely blind to the damage she caused, how her comments could leave people feeling humiliated, small, and worthless. My heart sank as she continued to justify her behavior, spinning it into something trivial, almost as if the harm didn't matter. The coldness in her response was unnerving. It was as though she couldn't fathom why I was disappointed or why I was questioning everything I thought I knew about her. Instead of seeing the toxic patterns, she doubled down on her defiance. I couldn't understand how the woman I loved could be so unrepentant, so willing to protect her pride over acknowledging the pain she'd caused. It felt like a wall had gone up between us, and I wasn't sure how to break through. After our conversation failed to make any real progress, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had changed between us. I spent the night at my place, alone, drowning in confusion. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I loved, seemed so different now. Her refusal to acknowledge her actions and the way she defended her toxic behavior, it made me question everything. Was this who she really was, or was I just seeing the cracks in the facade that had been there all along? I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. I needed space to think, to figure out if this relationship was worth saving. The trust I once had in her felt fragile, like it could shatter with the slightest touch. I decided to take a step back, unsure of what the future held. Could I ever look past her cruelty, her lack of remorse? Could I continue to be with someone who couldn't understand why what she did was wrong? The uncertainty gnawed at me. Maybe a break would help me see clearly. But deep down, I knew it might also be the end of us.